But, you know, from where Samson left off, you know, he reeled out some of the stats about some of the poll PU. 7%, for instance, of the polling units, he says smart card readers was not used. And so does this clarify what, you know, you earlier spoke about?
Clearly, in such places, there could have been an election because the guideline is very clear on that. But if it was a case of, okay, the smart card reader was used and there was this little challenge, it was able to screen this and top rate was an issue, provisions were made for that. But that it was not used at all, there certainly could have been an election in that place. So if there is such place, if there are such places where elections took place and the results are being considered, obviously, that would be a violation of the guidelines. So there could have been, and in such cases, it's as good as no election took place there. Because there's a difference between voting took place and you are cancelling, you know, the votes. The fact that either you didn't deploy smart card readers or that they were deliberately not used, you can't, you know, punish people for that.
You know, because part of what they were trying to correct with this is, you remember when the INEC chairman spoke about underage voters.
Yeah.
He says if there's anyone who's out there, because the process of verification, if the smart card reader fails to authenticate you or your fingerprint is not verified, authenticated, and you don't thumbprint in the appropriate box in the register of voters, or you don't provide your phone number, you should have no business voting. So if all of these are not provided, it means that there is a question that really needs to be raised.
Certainly. So what we need to confirm is whether smart card readers were actually deployed to those places and there was a deliberate effort by the polling officer.
Yeah, but he also said 5% of the areas, smart card readers malfunctioned and were not replaced.
But the rule is that if there is a malfunctioning of any of the smart card readers and you make such a complaint and by 2 p.m. it is not fixed, then election will be moved to the next day.
No, but if it was not fixed and they voted,
they couldn't have. How do you vote? How do you vote?
Yeah, but that's the challenge. That's what they're highlighting.
It's already clear.
They proceeded.
Yeah, it's already clear that INEC cannot consider such results. It will amount to fraud. Because it's as good as they were not accredited.
That is the observation that these guys made.
Exactly.
Will that be in the report that will go to the INEC?
It should. The polling officer will give a report. The supervisors, in fact, through the hierarchy, down to the rec, there will be a report that there was this situation, and that is the situation that will lead to INEC, you know, giving them a
if this report doesn't include this fact?
The report should include the fact.
And guys, don't forget, when he also spoke about the PU 024 in FCT, where 300 people didn't find their names on the register, even though they had their PVCs given by INEC. Yeah. Now, this is just one of the PUs which he happens to see. And then what if there are other PUs?
No, there are many. There are many others.
And so you ask yourself, look, this speaks to a wider challenge of, could there be some persons within INEC who were working against the system to make sure they compromise it? Because they all know the rules.
Well, I would say, but you know, that number is quite frightening, about 300. But I know that there are other places where you get about 1, 2, 3, you know.
And they all stack up.
Yeah, but 300 in an area, honestly, that would be a very...
Would you lay this on the hugeness of the number of voters? Because this is the last time, this is perhaps the biggest election Nigeria has ever concluded. Would you blame this on the sheer size of...
I wouldn't, because don't forget that every other year there will be increase in number, so we must always prepare ahead to ensure. We know that this year we have this number, by next year there will be, you know, more people. So the question of number should not be an issue at all. What is critical is that these people have registered. And if they have duly registered, their PVCs are issued, there must be a document, there must be a data from which this PVC was produced. So why is it missing? Why should it be missing? However, I heard somebody was somewhere, I think in the Anambra or somewhere, saying that the results of a particular unit were sent to another place. So could it be that the register for those particular persons was equally sent to a wrong place? That could be, but that INEC does not have data. How did you manage to produce these PVCs? Okay, so it will be very challenging.
Let me ask you.
Hold on. Let's get this first. We'll come to Samson, but don't forget that there's I think a 30B polling zone in Aguda, Surulere, where voting was in progress. The voter reports here that when then unknown people who looked like soldiers, according to him, but they didn't have their name tags, kicked the ballot boxes into the gutter. Let's see how this transpires. Oh, look at that. So this is one of those incidences where this happened. And so you just wonder, in this kind of scenario where security was supposed to be there to prevent this kind of scenario from going on, and you see this particular scenario, it only underscores and raises much more questions about the role, the functions, whether or not you assess the performance of security. That was a security personnel.
Yeah, it looks like a member of the Nigeria police, but the one you just mentioned, you said they were in army uniform. Now, was any of the, because INEC said that, I remember listening to the PRO of the police force, Frank Kumba, he says any security officer who does not have his tag, and INEC, tag as well, apart from his name tag, INEC. So if these security men we're talking about never had any such thing, it means that they were fake. Because the man has made it, because somebody asked him, how do we identify the fake and the genuine? Considering the reports of various, seized police uniform, army uniform, boots, and all the items that have been imported into this country. We never can tell how many of them have actually found their way into the system. So how do we identify the fake and the genuine? And the man said they will be all properly tagged, properly marked. So you will look at for such signs. Was there any such thing? Was there a name tag? Was there any INEC identification that will show that this one is on duty for INEC? Because not the entire Nigerian army was actually, at work.
But even at that, people would have to contend with whether or not to even look out for that.
That is another
how
issue.
many people are informed about this fact?
That's another challenge.
Well, look at another scenario. Don't worry, you still go there.
Yeah,
this is coming from Oshun.
Wow.
And it talks about there's a certain Christiane Oloide who is an ad hoc staff for Oriade local government. That's where the INEC office is in Ijebu, Ijesha, Oshun State. And they said at about 3 a.m. Sunday, 24th. See the ballot boxes that were brought out and the papers there. You could cite them. No security at the time of this. You see how they're in flames. So
this is really appalling. That this could happen at INEC office at a time like this. Not a polling unit now, INEC office. No,
this is where the results were.
Yes,
where the materials
honestly.
were.
Samson spoke about at the collation center. How were they able to access this? Where were the security agencies? So maybe does this speak to some of those challenges that we're facing? Because security is supposed to be there to guarantee this vote and this ballots. So if they're not there and this is burned, this will definitely affect the results.
Of course, the results are already affected. Even though, in the course of collation, there is a technical officer who will equally, capture these results electronically. Those results that are manually written, they were also supposed to be captured electronically. But you can only verify when you have this manual, and the electronic one. Yeah, because don't forget that there could be anything. And we want to be sure that what we are seeing is what we have actually, produced. So the idea was to ensure that we compare notes, the physical, that is the electronic, and the one that was manually done. So once there's corroboration, then it becomes the result. But in this case, if you have only the electronic, there might equally be challenges. People could doubt.
Could you put
now? But again, the challenge of security. Like yesterday, I listened to an eyewitness, that was interviewed at Okota. And the person said that those thugs who came and, set fire on those things actually attempted on different occasions. And the first time they came, they saw the resilience of the people and they went back. They did the second one, tried to, and everybody was on ground and they ensured that the process continued. So when they saw how resilient they were, they retreated. You see, but a while later, a call came and one of the policemen received a call who looks like their leader. And after that call, all of them just left. And a few minutes later, those guys stormed the place, and that was how the havoc was wreaked on the whole exercise. So I remember a lot of people were equally calling for a thorough investigation to know the role, to ascertain the role of the security agents. Because it raises a lot of suspicion that the police could leave such a scene. Where could all of them have gone to at the same time?
It raises a lot of questions, but until we get that kind of scene, maybe INEC will address it, or maybe INEC in conjunction with the police will have to maybe speak on that. But if you look at the Oshun situation, where we just played that video, and INEC's office was attacked, if you remember, Oshun State had an election before this general elections, in which a lot of foul was being screamed out loud on the processes that went down there. But can you make the dots? Did you see this coming from Osun State, for instance, that we could have had a situation because of how tight the elections were previously? The security architecture, particularly for Osun State, ought to have been even more tighter. But this is what you have, without the police presence.
Yeah, it's really appalling. And this speaks to the fact that, you know, there were a lot of challenges with the security arrangement, generally, not just for Osun, except that those at Osun went ahead to, you know, carry out this kind of a sinister act. You know, but I expected that, considering, you know, the events of the last election, the governorship election in Osun State, the security apparatus would have been well structured, and there would have been proper strategic arrangement to ensure that essentially this center is secured. We saw the tension that greeted the last election, the governorship election in Osun State, and you cannot just write it off. You cannot write it off, essentially considering the fact that the PDP believes that they won the election. All right? But at the moment, it's the APC that's actually occupying the seat. So they will want to do everything to ensure, to prove to the rest of the world that we actually did win the last election. And our members, so now, one thing I've noticed is that parties generally, once they notice that this particular place is a stronghold, and they don't seem to have a way of winning that particular spot, the safest and most beneficial option for them is to destroy the votes.
Is that what happened in Lagos State, considering the rallies that were held in Lagos State, especially in Agor and Isolo, where we had this kind of violence, and that one where the ballot box was kicked into the gutter?
Yeah, we can only suspect. For now, we cannot truly ascertain. But that is a scenario that does play out. It has happened before. I remember, you know, when I, you know, during, in 2003, in my own ward, my ward was to be a determining factor for an election. And when the other guys noticed that this place, as a matter of fact, they invited me, you know, as one of the contestants, and they saw that this is a stronghold. Can we get this place? I said, well, let the election play themselves out. And they saw they were not going to. What they did was to ensure that they disrupted the election and ensure that the election for my ward were cancelled. And that alone gave them the opportunity. So the opponents can always do anything. Once they notice that this particular place, they won't get anything, or they won't get much. Right. So we cannot tell what really happened there, but we can only suspect.
So what happens in this instance? What can INEC do?
Obviously, my own position is that INEC should not deny people, you know, the right to vote and the right for their votes to count based on the activities of hoodlums. Because if you continue to do this, it means that this trend will continue to thrive. A scenario in which once the election is disrupted, you cancel the votes. So everybody will begin to work in that direction to ensure that you keep cancelling those areas that they believe they don't have weight. So we must find a way of ensuring that those votes count. If it means going back to conduct the election, please do. Because like the case of Okota, you cannot tell that the people were not well organized. So why will you deny their votes because some hoodlums came as a result of your inability to secure the process? Right. And we now see even INEC collation offices, centers and INEC office being burned, being destroyed. These are places, security, there was enough vote for security. Apart from the fact that Nigeria budgeted for security, INEC equally provided. So why shouldn't there be enough security, you know?
Okay, Ayo, I think we can squeeze this in.
Yes, Samson, some of the issues that you have raised are, you know, very, very, you know, they are of very serious concern to many people, me inclusive. But are these issues that you have raised, and of course Dan here, do you think they are sufficient, they are strong enough to invalidate those ballots, or you think we can still dance around it?
I think it's important to emphasize that elections are measured by specific indicators. There are about 5 fundamental principles that underpin credible elections. First, it's about a legal framework, and a legal framework needs to be clear and unambiguous, because elections is a game governed by rules, and where there's a default or non-compliance with the rules, it could potentially undermine the integrity of the elections. what these incidents and these reports clearly show is that there's some level of non-compliance with the guidelines, and therefore the integrity of the election in that particular polling unit, it's not guaranteed. And that is why the guidelines are very, very clear, and the electoral law is very, very clear, that where a voter is accredited or is allowed to vote without their PVCs, INEC is restrained from using the card reader for accreditation, the election in that polling unit will be cancelled, or 0 votes will be entered according to the guidelines provided by INEC. So I think that there are questions that border on the integrity of elections in those locations where this happened. And this is where the Electoral Commission has a huge responsibility